You know, foldables for me have always had one big problem. They've always felt too thick to fully replace my smartphone experience, while at the same time, I still want them to be powerful enough to give me that hybrid tablet-like experience. So did Samsung finally fix that with the Galaxy Z Fold 7? Let's find out. What's up, internet? I'm Brian McDuff, aka BMac, and welcome to another video. Today we are going to be covering the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 7, letting you know everything you need to know about this new Sammy foldable. I was actually, for the first time ever, invited to Galaxy Unpacked in Brooklyn for the Z Fold 7 and Z Flip 7 launch, where Samsung actually lent out a Fold 7 for me to be able to check out, use, and enjoy. So Samsung, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I appreciate you. But there is a lot to cover with this device, so let's get right into it. And we'll start things off here with probably the biggest question for this device. How did Samsung pull off the design of the Z Fold 7 and make it thin enough to feel practical and natural while maintaining its powerful performance? My first thought when holding the Z Fold 7 in my hand was, how is this even possible? Where does all the tech go? This thing is only 9mm thick when folded and just 4.2mm thick when unfolded. It is stunning to hold this device in your hand and to actually use it, and no matter what else I have to say throughout the course of this review, what Samsung has pulled off here with the engineering of this device is nothing short of astonishing. Because now the Fold 7 truly does feel like a practical device that I could use as both a regular smartphone and as a tablet, but one that folds up and fits into my pocket seamlessly, without the bulk or awkwardness that it used to come with in the past. Now I could finally go on record and say that this is one of my favorite smartphone designs ever. But it's not just about the design here either, it's also about the materials that Samsung has used to pull this off. Samsung used Armor Aluminum, a slightly more scratch and shatter resistant Gorilla Glass Victus Ceramic 2 on the front, and Gorilla Glass Victus 2 on the back, so you get a thinner design without sacrificing durability. All your buttons are gonna be on the right side of the device, and they'll remain there even when you unfold it, so that's right where they should be, with your dedicated volume rocker switch and a fingerprint scanner power button right below that. You do also get 2D face unlock, but I just find myself disabling that and using the fingerprint scanner itself because it's more secure and just as reliable. You still get dual nano SIM support through the top tray. You also do get eSIM support, and at any given time you could actually run 2 different SIMs. Plus you're getting the same impressive IP48 dust and water resistance despite the thinner size here, which is nice to see, which is also gonna come with submersion protection up to 1.5 meters deep of water for up to 30 minutes. You do also have stereo speakers in the Fold 7 on the top and the bottom of the top half of the device, so if you wanna take advantage of those, just make sure when you're opening up into the inner display that you rotate it 90 degrees to the right, so that way you actually have left and right channels. With all this weighing in at just 215 grams, making both display experiences light enough to use, and also making them both very natural to use. The Z Fold 7 is also available in several different colors, those colors being jet black, silver shadow, blue shadow, or mint as a Samsung online exclusive. And I personally have been rocking the blue shadow color here, but as you can see, I do have a black leather back skin applied here for a little bit of added ruggedness, but also protection. I will be sure to leave a link for the exact skins that I'm using on these devices in the video description box below, so be sure to check those out. But when it comes to the displays, does the Z Fold 7 still deliver a big, bright flagship experience? Or does Samsung have to compromise a little bit to make it this thin? Starting things out here on the outside, the cover display of the Z Fold 7 is gonna be a full-length 6.5-inch 1 to 120 Hz LTPO always-on AMOLED display with a 1080 by 2520 resolution, boasting a 422 PPI pixel density rating. And is capable of a peak brightness up to a commendable 2600 nits, which tracks because I never found the cover display to be too dim even when using it outdoors. But then we move into the inner display that opens up into a beautiful 8-inch 1 to 120 Hz foldable dynamic LTPO always-on AMOLED display with a 1968 by 2184 resolution, boasting a 368 PPI pixel density rating. The inner display is also capable of up to 2600 nits of peak brightness, so just like the cover display, I found it to get plenty bright for most of my needs. Both displays do support HDR10+ content, though I do generally prefer Dolby Vision for its broader content library and wider platform support. But regardless, HDR10+ on both displays, something to be happy about. But for anyone who is prone to headaches or eye strain when using displays, there is something here worth noting. Both displays were tested to show sub 500 Hz PWM dimming rates at all brightness levels, with the outer display actually switching to a double pulse pattern above 50% brightness. If you've never noticed flicker or cared about PWM dimming rates on other devices, this likely won't be an issue for you. I mean, I personally read ebooks on the main display of the Z Fold 7 for hours on end without any kind of discomfort, but if you are flicker sensitive and you do sometimes get eye strain or headaches when using displays, this is something to perhaps be aware of. The bezels look fine. They're only about 3 millimeters around the inner and cover displays, so zero complaints from me there. And I know everyone always wonders about the crease when you're dealing with a foldable, but I can honestly say that the crease for me is probably the best it's ever been. I can honestly say that I rarely, if ever, notice it. If I'm using the inner display and I'm outside, I'm reading a book, even if I'm in bright light situations where there could be reflections off that crease, I did not find it all that noticeable. I think this is the best it's ever been, and it's really probably the most seamless it's ever been going into the actual main display experience without noticing that crease. So all in all, I am loving the display experiences on the Z Fold 7. It's, for me, the best it's ever been. There just don't seem to be any kind of compromises I have to make here. It feels like a flagship quality display experience on both displays. But now let's talk about the cameras and whether or not the Z Fold 7 can compete with Samsung's own flagship, or if this happens to be an area where you will start to notice some foldable compromises. The Z Fold 7 is gonna ship with 5 different cameras. That's gonna be 3 rear-facing cameras on the back, and then of course a selfie camera cutout on both the main and the outer display. On paper, you're getting a 200 megapixel f1.7 wide-angle lens with OIS, a 10 megapixel f2.4 tele lens with OIS and 3x optical zoom, and a 12 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide lens now with autofocus. Plus you're gonna get your identical 10 megapixel f2.2 selfie cameras on those inner and outer displays. The inner selfie camera is now once again a cutout selfie camera, and honestly, this does not bother me one bit. I rarely notice it, and I will take a higher quality selfie camera on the main display over the under display camera that we had in the past, even if I do think that display tech was pretty darn cool. You're also getting video capabilities up to 8K 30 frames per second or slow motion up to 1080p 240 frames per second, plus selfie video up to 4K 60 frames per second. For me personally, I've always kind of held this belief that for me to fully embrace a foldable, it should at least match or come very darn close to the camera quality and camera selections on the non-folding flagship counterpart. Unfortunately, that is not the case this year, as we do get an additional 5x periscope telephoto lens on the S25 Ultra, in addition to a higher megapixel ultra-wide lens, so this is still superior. But you know what? Even with that taken into consideration, I think I could still finally say that the gap between the two devices for the camera quality and the camera selection now is probably small enough for me to still be able to choose the Fold 7 over the S25 Ultra if that display experience of going into the main display, the whole foldable thing, was important to me. So if there's still a compromise you have to make by getting a foldable here with the Z Fold 7, it's gonna be slightly that camera system, but it's the best it's ever been, and honestly, for most people's needs, if you love the fold experience, you'll probably be totally okay with the camera experience too. But now with having said that, we gotta talk about how the cameras actually perform. As you can see from some of the example photos here, on the main lens, images look just as good as they do on the S25 Ultra. I really like the detail, dynamic range, and sharpness and overall photo balance, especially because we have that 200 megapixel sensor now pixel binning down to make it look beautiful. And the 3x telephoto lens holds up pretty well also. It's better than I thought it would be for its specs. It might not quite be on par with what I would ideally hope for, especially when I start to pixel peep, but if I'm not cropping in after the fact or just zooming in past 3x when taking the photo, and if I have a lot of light to work with, I'm okay with it. It looks solid. You also have the ultra wide, and with the ultra wide, like the tele lens, I find myself actually okay with it despite it not looking too impressive on paper. I'm not much of a selfie taker, but when I was looking at the example photos, things looked good, the colors looked good, the overall balance and the skin tones looked great. Night mode performed solidly on the main lens as well, and even with the ultra wide or tele lenses, although I'm not totally in love with the night mode on the ultra wide or tele lenses, I think that's where you can start to see some of those lower camera specs coming into play, but more than acceptable results and definitely usable. And video looks great too, especially when you have super steady stabilization turned on. That can make your footage look like it was filmed directly on a gimbal. And low light video holds up in the main lens too, and just like the night mode photos, it could get a little bit noisy pretty fast on the wide and tele lenses, but overall, not bad. I'm very satisfied with the camera performance of the Z Fold 7. To get that level of performance on a foldable is awesome. Now, as for performance, I know what you're probably wondering, with all this tech packed into such a slim body, can the Z Fold 7 really keep up with Samsung's most powerful phones? Or does its thin design start to make it throttle? Straight up, I'm just gonna tell you right away here, the performance on the Z Fold 7 for me has been rock solid. It's been smooth and it's actually been impressive for a device this thin. It's got a Snapdragon 8 Elite for Galaxy chipset with 12 gigs of RAM in the 256 or 512 gig storage models, or 16 gigs of RAM in the 1 terabyte storage model. And you do also have a RAM plus RAM expansion feature, which allows you to expand that RAM up to an additional 12 gigs using free internal storage. I've personally been testing the 12 256 model here, and it's more than capable for my needs. In my opinion, as a foldable, the Z Fold 7 needs to handle multitasking and that phone tablet hybrid experience. And it does. I really started to put multitasking and performance power to the test here when using the main display on the Z Fold 7, since I think that's one of its key selling points anyway, and I was more than happy with its fluidity, smoothness, and overall capability. If you specifically look up the benchmarks for this device, you are gonna notice slightly lower performance than other Snapdragon 8 Elite devices, but that's probably likely due to the fact that the engineers had a limited amount of space to actually work with. And that's probably because after a short time of running the CPU or GPU at a sustained high level of performance, they're gonna throttle you back a little bit to make sure the phone's running cool. Which makes sense because I've personally never had a problem with the Z Fold 7 getting noticeably hot in my hands. This thing runs very cool. You're getting Bluetooth 5.4 built in with support for the SBC, AAC, aptX, LDAC, and SSC audio codecs, which I love to see here. I love me some high resolution Bluetooth audio codecs. And you're also getting a guaranteed 7 years of major Android OS and security patch updates. But then we gotta talk about battery, because when a phone gets this thin, the first question you're probably gonna be asking is how long can it really last for? So does the Z Fold 7 hold up throughout the full day? Or is endurance still its biggest compromise? For starters, the Z Fold 7 houses a 4,400 mAh battery, which remarkably is the same size as last year's thicker Z Fold 6. And then don't forget, you do also have that more efficient Snapdragon 8 Elite for Galaxy chipset built in that we talked about earlier. So with the battery the same size and a more efficient chip, one could assume slightly better battery life in the Z Fold 7 compared to the Z Fold 6, right? Well, your assumption would be correct. That was so cheesy. But yes, 100% you're gonna be getting slightly better battery life here on the Z Fold 7. I would say figure at least 6 hours of screen on time with mixed usage between the two displays and mixed usage in general between video games or watching YouTube videos, whatever it is you're doing, which might not be quite on par with the screen on time of other flagship smartphones. But again here, considering that those are probably shipping with a larger battery and that they're not as thin as the Z Fold 7, I think you should be pretty happy with what you have here for battery performance in this device. But when it comes time to recharge the Z Fold 7, it is capable of up to 25 watts of wire charging or 15 watts of wireless charging, while also delivering 4.5 watts of reverse wireless charging. You do also get quick charging here, being able to go from 0 to 50% battery in just around 30 minutes, or a full charge taking upwards of around an hour and a half. It's nice to have that 0 to 50% quick charge in 30 minutes, but it definitely takes a little longer than I would like it to be to go from 0 to 100% for a full charge. All in all, I'd have to say the battery life of the Z Fold 7 is pretty darn solid. It's a great category for the device, especially for foldable, and it can't be considered a weakness anymore. If the foldable lasts you an entire day and is this darn thin, I'd consider that a win. But with all this having been said, here are my final thoughts on the Z Fold 7 and whether or not it's finally thin enough to feel like a smartphone and yet powerful enough to open up into a tablet experience. The short answer for me is gonna be yes. Absolutely. The Z Fold 7 for me is the first foldable experience that feels like two devices in one without feeling like two devices in one. In other words, it serves as an everyday smartphone that's actually comfortable to use no matter which display you're on. It's thinner, lighter, and powerful enough to handle anything that I threw at it. It's not necessarily perfect, who knows if it ever will be. I would like to see faster charging, perhaps a little bit better battery life, and even better cameras, but those things do now feel pretty darn minor in comparison to what Samsung has pulled off here. If you've been waiting for a time to pick up a fold where it no longer feels like it's bulky, kind of awkward, or more novelty, now is probably the best time to do it because I am in love with this device, and it is a device that I absolutely could see myself using on a daily basis. As always, for the latest deals, prices, promos, or information for the Z Fold 7, you can of course always head to my affiliate link, bmac.link/zfold7, or of course, as always, there will be clickable links in the video description box and in the comment section below, so check those out. I'm gonna go finish my book that I've been reading on this baby and just kind of kick back and relax while this video uploads. I'm gonna go do that. I will see you guys in my next video.